We thought you were actually gonna do some yoga.
I can hear just fine.
It's 6:05, let's get going. I feel like I'm on a little island over here. All right, let's take attendance, I guess. Do we have quorum, Steve?
Maybe we could do introductions.
Introductions, all right. My name is Todd Zarnett, so I'll be the chair of the meeting. And let's go around.
My name is Tanya March and I'm on the board and I'm the chair of the Parks and Events Committee.
Okay, there.
I'm Norm Golston. I'm here today representing the Slabtown Kiwanis Club. International. Norm Golston, GHOLSTON.
And I'm Juliet Hyams, board member.
Steve Moskowitz, a member of the board here and also a member of our Safety and Livability Committee.
Steve Finger, I'm a member of the board.
Giselle Johnson, member of the board, member of the planning committee, member of the parks committee.
Now, Alan Boston, Northwest Examiner.
He Graviel, candidate for District 33 in the Morgan House and also in
Pete, what's your last name again?
Graviel.
How in the world would you spell that?
Great question. GRA, he is in boy,
Let's go around the horn online, Rich.
There we go. Yeah, sorry. I'm Rich Gronsteisky. I am the treasurer of the NWDA, and I'm a member of the board and a member of the Parks Committee.
Michael,
Can you hear me?
you can.
Yeah.
Okay, aloha from Kauai.
Oh,
It's time for my nap. It's 3 o'clock here. But anyway, Michael Viera, communications chair for NWDA.
and Krista.
Hi, everyone. Krista Reyes Klein, board member.
All right, and we got some duplicates online here.
Your replicants.
Yeah. Maybe some doppelgangers possibly. So we're at Friendly House, doing a live part of it. I figured out last minute how to get a projector going, so we can see everybody's beautiful faces in room this time, so incrementally improving the in-person experience as it may.
Out of play.
And, still looking for name placards and a couple other things on the list of to-dos.
And Mr. President, yes, we do have a quorum.
Excellent. Meeting minutes review. Anything to review here?
There's nothing to review. The minutes went out, or the recording of the last meeting went out with the agenda, along with the slightly modified agenda to serve as your guide in the recording. I would move to accept both of those.
What was the last part?
I would move to accept the recording and the attending agenda.
Is there a second to approve?
Second.
An objection? All right, so moved. President's report, I don't really have too much. Slabtown Park, I have nothing there. I haven't heard anything. Has anybody heard anything about Slabtown Park?
Any day now.
I think we were thinking about inviting somebody from, who's the commissioner in charge of parks?
Ryan?
Yeah, are we still thinking about doing that? Inviting somebody from Ryan's office? We should probably
Sure.
do that again. And then, I was thinking today, do we want to invite the company, Guardian to say anything, or, maybe he wouldn't come, but should we extend an invite maybe to see how we can help move things along or something like that? Yeah.
I think an invite is appropriate to ensure their engagement.
Would that include Red Order, Parks?
Sure. Yeah, let's do triangulate the whole, try to get the owner of the property, Brett, and then see if somebody from Ryan's office wants to talk. And we've been down to council a couple times. And, we keep kind of getting message that something's happening imminently.
Should, I can take an action to call up the staffer who told me to be patient, and I should say, I'm being patient.
Start from where?
From Ryan's office.
From Ryan's office.
Yeah, check, maybe copy Steve and then, we'll go from there.
Okay.
District 4 meetings, still were. NWNW is morphing into the District 4 coalition. We're working on now what possibly the bylaws might look like. My question about like what that corporate structure will look like is NWNW going away? Or how is that gonna work? And it will apparently be NWNW doing business as the District 4 coalition. That means that the current directors will have to vote and approve a set of bylaws to incorporate the rest of the neighborhood. So there's some complications there a little bit. And but it's interesting that how that's all gonna work. I volunteered to be on the governing law committee, I guess, because I think there's a big push, at least from, it seems like Darlene, I don't know who else, to incorporate more than neighborhoods into this organization and bring in business associations and other community associations, stuff like that. I don't know where this is coming from. In my view, this is a neighborhood association coalition, and it should remain that way, at least into the foreseeable future. I don't think it's something, you don't want to inject new classes of groups into the structure when, you know, we're kind of taking on a whole other part of the city. So, Steve?
And that has been the position taken by this board in the past as well. So that raises a question to me. So talking about the existing NWNW bylaws being modified to incorporate 15 new neighborhoods.
Correct.
Which is kind of a big chunk. And then would those
Additional or
addition,
in addition to the 11?
right?
Yeah, and I think it's more than that. Currently, there's how many, like maybe 15 that are currently in the coalition. It's going up to like 31. They're absorbing
Are there 70 or 90 total?
in the whole city.
Yeah.
Something like that. Sort of the issue too.
My question is,
There we go.
so if this 11 entity animal needs another 20 entities.
That's 1/3 of the city, that's all.
Yeah, right. Then does the new entity influence the city have over the bylaws?
Well, I think a lot. So, yeah. I think the current entity has a lot of, you know, is going to have a lot because they have to vote and approve the bylaws. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. It's a little odd. And yeah, I agree. So I'll be looking into more of that.
You know, now you're in, and the bylaws that enable you to be in are in effect. I mean,
We'll have to pay attention to that. And the other thing there real quick is the funding mechanism from City Life is still being contested where the funding for neighborhoods, Civic Life wants to split it equally between all of the coalitions or what will become the new coalitions. However, districts 1 and 4 have 30 neighborhoods each and 2 and 3 have 15 each. So all of a sudden you have, or you could possibly have a lot, you know, certain neighborhoods having a lot more funds sort of available than other neighborhoods just because they're in a different, more neighborhood heavy coalition. So that is something that's been trying to figure out right now too. It's getting a little contentious. Let's shift into the Northwest Parking District real quick there, an announcement that we're gonna have a meeting on Wednesday here of the SAC. It's a meeting that the members of the SAC put together between Amy and myself. We had a conversation with PBOT on what we needed to do to make this happen. They were surprisingly accommodating. And we just need to send them agenda and we need to do a couple things in meeting to keep it in compliance with Oregon public meeting laws. They went through that list, we have that, and PBOT sent out a meeting agenda and link and information to their interested parties list today. So that's cool, and we'll see what happens on Wednesday.
who will be running
I don't know yet. It'll be me or Amy or a combination of the two. So we'll have to see. So I think this is a good step forward. Kind of the interesting thing about the parking stack is it's not really clear who controls it. It was created, an entity created by city council. PBOT's involved, but they don't really run it, nor do they create it, but they have responsibilities to it. So I think this is a good step to exert some independent action. So we'll see what becomes of the meeting on Wednesday. So we'll transition that into a special guest. And Rich has his hand up real quick. Rich?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting in the PBOT announcement that they said that they were looking forward, well, I don't think they used the word looking forward, that they were going to continue to interact with all of the parking districts starting in April. That this meeting was just a meeting of the SAC without PBOT, but that in April they were planning on having meetings with all of the parking districts, all the parking district associations. So I thought that maybe they've recognized that they really need to do this. So
yeah, well, that was the idea from the beginning. So they're going to put everything on pause until April and then open it back up again. And so this is sort of a rogue meeting, I would say, that wasn't called by PBOT, and but PBOT is tolerating it, I guess, to some extent. And so I think it'll be a good meeting. So if anybody has an opportunity to come, the live part will be here at Friendly House at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, and then we'll have a Zoom link too, so you can check in on the Zoom. To talk a little bit more about the parking districts, we have special guests. And Steve, do you want to introduce our guest? You were sort of instrumental in inviting them.
I can, Cynthia Castro from Commissioner Commissioner Mapp's office, was kind enough to, or she drew the short straw, depending on to join us this evening in a kind of slow motion response to a request that had been made by board member Jeremy Sachs several months ago. The initial request was made with a view towards what in the world is going on with the parking district and its SAC and the future. The broader question is what in the world is going on with PBOT and its relationship with our neighborhood. And I don't need to phrase it necessarily exactly that way, but I think as I prefaced our meeting last month that is now taking place this month with Cynthia, in a memo to her, or in an email to her, stated, there were some additional materials that we were forwarding that we thought were relevant to our discussion or our desired discussion. And they noted three general points. An April 2021 NWDA memo provides a summarization of the NWDA's ongoing frustrations in participating with PBOT in the planning of our neighborhood streets.
Let's speed up this intro and get to our guest here.
Secondly, the NWDA resolution from August 2023 seems to have precipitated the SAC suspension. And third, there was a general feeling that the October 23 PBOT letter that suspended the SAC kind of mischaracterized a lot of the SAC's actions. So, Cynthia, we're just hoping to get some kind guidance from you in our relationship with PBOT. So that's all.
So, Cynthia, what kind of clarity can, what details can you give us about how the PBOT and your office views the Northwest Parking District at the moment?
Yeah, and thank you so much. And I thought I would just share a little bit of background. I think this is my first time attending this meeting. So I joined Commissioner Mapp's office as his Deputy Chief of Staff and liaison to PBOT somewhere in September of 2023. Before that, I was with Multnomah County Commissioner Sharon Myron, who is the representative for District 1, which includes Northwest Portland. And then before that, I was with Commissioner Rubio's office overseeing Portland Parks and Recreation. Before that, I was with Commissioner Fritz overseeing our Office of Equity. And then before that, I started with the city, working in our director's office for Portland Parks and Recreation. So thanks again for having me here. And thanks, Steve, for sharing all the materials with me. I did have the chance to review all of them. My apologies, I couldn't make it to the February meeting. Steve might have shared that I had a family medical emergency that happened. So I was planning to be there that evening, but it happened that afternoon. So happy to be here with you all this evening. So I think that the question around, and I think I also got that press announcement from PBOT about the meeting on Wednesday. So if that's a meeting that I'm able to listen into, I'm happy to be there as well. Otherwise, I will just review notes afterwards, I suppose, about feedback from that conversation. But I will say again, like this letter that came from PBOT in October and the conversation that we had with the Bureau, literally the second day on the job for me is when PBOT had their budget work session presentation to council and shared that they had a over $30 million budget shortfall. So obviously I stepped into the role with a very difficult financial forecast for the Bureau. And then when we had the conversation about pausing the Northwest Parking District Stakeholder Advisory Committee, for me, again, it was really from an administrative standpoint that we wanted to ensure that the Bureau was able to support the advisory committee to the best of its ability, as well as to make sure that it could support the goals and strategic plan of the Bureau and have a good working relationship. And it sounded like to me that capacity was a major challenge that the Bureau was expressing as far as like capacity, the growing demands of appropriately staffing the committee, as well as the budget constraints. And as you all know, and it sounds like you're already having conversations too about the form of government change that we're experiencing currently. So it also along those lines, sort of the larger conversations happening across the city around advisory committees and, you know, everything we're doing right now is we're taking a look at how we function as a city government and how to best set up the next council and our city administrator and deputy city administrator. So for me personally, it sounded like it made sense to just take a moment to be able to collect ourselves, have time to have these conversations and put some real thought into it. Again, as we're having sort of some of these like larger conversations as well. I will share that, you know, a sentiment that I'm kind of hearing, not from PBOT, but just in the city is, and the experience that I had, I mentioned that, you know, I've worked for multiple city commissioners across, you know, about six or 7 years, some of those during the pandemic. The council, I've seen different council members and makeups. And I do remember, you know, when I worked for Commissioner Fritz, there was a lot of conversations about the neighborhood system. Commissioner Udaley was in office at the time. And I will just share personally that I feel like there's a lot of value in the neighborhood associations, and actually the way that we're going to be structured as a government lends itself even better because of the geographic representation, and neighborhood associations, business associations are already set up that way very nicely. So I just want to share that me personally, as well as my boss, we do value the neighborhood association system quite a bit. They play an important part in our functioning as a city. So just wanted to share that with you, and also just share you some background about sort of what contributed to decisions around supporting PBOT's proposal to take a pause. And like I said, I'm excited that there's conversations that are happening on the 20th. PBOT is also going to brief us on work that they've been doing since the pause ahead of that April meeting. So I'll just share to you that I have not had the chance to see sort of what their recommendations are, but we will have the chance to see those soon.
What's the best way? Can we just go around the horn and pepper you with some questions now, or what's is that what
I'm here for you all, so whatever you would like to do.
All right, I'll jump in and ask the first question, then if somebody has a question next, we'll raise your hand, we'll do one at a time and just go round robin. I think what, in my view, when the pause happened, I know that all of the SACs all the parking districts were paused, and I think we got a letter that was very testy towards our committee in particular, I guess, in a way that they thought we weren't behaving well or something like that. And I guess from our view, it was like, well, we felt that in Peabod's view, not behaving well was just not totally on board with what they were talking about and giving pushback to some of the ideas. Can you give us some clarity into, you know, some of that communication and maybe what the feeling was behind it and how can we move forward past whatever that emotional comment was?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think that we're always striving for an inclusive space where people can share their differing opinions. It sounded like maybe there were members that had shared that they didn't necessarily feel that way as a participant. So that was definitely something that we heard. I would say that was like the prime example that we heard. Like I said, with the Bureau, I think that they've found growing demands. So the amount of time, not just in the meetings, but also beyond, in between meetings, to appropriately staff, those demands have grown. So like I said, I heard a lot about capacity and decision-making. So I did read in the memo, there was a reference to funding that had not been allocated because of decision-making. And so that is, you know, something that I am curious about as far as like the committee working together towards decisions when resources are available to help support the Northwest District. So those are a couple things that just come to mind.
We'll go to, well, let's just go around the room here.
Part of that, she was referring to Cynthia, when you refer to people not feeling included or welcomed, or I'm not sure I quite got that.
Oh, is there any clarity about people not feeling included?
Yes, but I don't have a specific name to share.
Gotcha.
But yes,
Okay.
that was a sentiment that was shared with the Bureau.
By an individual on the SAC, I guess. Gotcha. Okay. Richard had his hand up first.
Yes, I was curious. You had mentioned obviously funding issues with PBOT, but and that they were concerned about their ability to support the parking SAC. But my understanding is they don't actually fund any of the parking SAC. They don't actually give money to the parking SAC is a volunteer organization that meets with PBOT on a regular basis. So I don't understand how budgetary constraints could possibly have influenced whether or not they want to meet with the parking SAC. That's one point that I wanted to make. The second one was, I think, to reiterate what Todd was saying, that disagreeing, it appears, I'm not a member of the parking SAC, but it appears to me that any disagreement with PBOT about what they were doing, even if it was supported by the majority of the people in the Northwest District, was felt to be interfering with PBOT's activity rather than suggesting potential better ways of them for them to do things. The point that is raised is all of the trees they were going to cut down when they were putting in all of the new crossings, and they were going to destroy, I believe, 25 healthy trees. And I believe the parking SAC objected to that PBOT didn't appreciate their objections, but then they decided when there was enough public opinion showing in support of it, that they backed down and said that they weren't going to destroy those trees. So I think that example is just one example of how important the parking SAC is, that having input from the neighborhood is a really important thing. And PBOT seems to put together an agenda where they feel that they know better than the people who live in the neighborhoods how the neighborhood traffic should run. And I don't think that's true. I think that PBOT really needs input from the neighborhood, the people who live in the neighborhood, to help them understand what the people who live in the Northwest District feel are the important issues that should be addressed. And that was really all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Rich. Any comments? Cynthia?
Oops, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Well, I thank you for your comments, Rich. And, absolutely, we're public servants, and I totally agree that it's really important to get the input from community who actually are going to reside wherever we're making the capital improvements, infrastructure changes. So again, we definitely value the SAC, and absolutely want to continue for that to be a space where people can share that input. Community engagement is definitely something we're continuing to work on with PBOT and frankly across the city. Like I said, I've worked with different elected officials, I've worked with different bureaus, and I think it's something that we can continue to improve on. And so I hear your feedback, and like I said, we agree that we definitely need to genuinely engage with community, especially those that are going to be affected by whatever changes we're making. So thank you.
That's such funny for him.
I regret having the meters go in. I have a business that operates in this neighborhood on Foster Road and in St. John's. I work with Venture Portland. I do walking tours. I have been a part of the summer concert committee for 20-something years in this neighborhood. I'm still very active in this neighborhood. I really thought that the reason businesses, and I've been on the business association, which was founded by my deceased business partner here in this neighborhood, because I thought that we were going to have a voice on how half of that money was spent, that it would come from the community in an equal balance between the neighborhood association and the business association. And I think it's every time those meters grow out, I see it impacting negatively the businesses in this neighborhood. And so then when I also see that we no longer have a voice in this taxation of our customers, I wish those meters had never gone in. That's my personal opinion. I'm not representing any of the boards I'm on.
Joe Zell next.
Oh, wait, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Can you share more about the negative impact of the meters, like more specifically?
Elders, for example, when I work with oral histories, they will choose restaurants in neighborhoods that don't have meters when you give them an option. I have had my walking tours in this neighborhood be at 20% capacity, where my walking tours in St. John's and Foster have sold out already this year. People are not wanting to come in this neighborhood. We've also lost a bunch of parking spaces to these beautiful restaurant extensions that I'm not against. In fact, we were talking about those trees that would have taken out, that were, because of the curb extensions we're going to lose. We were also going to lose a number of built-in sidewalk seating for restaurants. It's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it's really hard. I worked with PBOT through the SAC for wayfinding to help people who visit our neighborhood. I kept having people during that Thurman ramp extension come in Ubers to come on tours for ghost tours at night and end up back on the Fremont Bridge because the signs that said the Thurman ramp was closed. They assumed that the store that I had the tour start out at Peculiarium was that street was closed. Oftentimes PBOT makes these wayfinding signs and they say, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We're adding these new alternative ways to get through the neighborhood, but Google's going to figure it all out eventually. I'm sorry, but tourists do not figure it out. Tourists need bathrooms and tourists like free parking and public transportation, of course.
And I will mention real quick that we worked with Legacy to open up two of the biggest garages. And in fact, on the weekends and evenings, with all of the garages, there's two stacks with hundreds of parking spaces. Garage 4, which is about 200 spaces, and the physician's parking lot has about 100 spaces. They're all $1 an hour, $5 max parking. Nobody really knows about it or takes advantage of it, and a lot of that we weren't able to work with the SAC or PBOT over the last couple of months to help publicize that. So there's tons of capacity over $1 an hour that nobody's using and nobody knows about. So that's something that we should be looking to utilize moving forward. There's still a huge perception that there's a lack of parking in the Northwest District, and we have these huge garages that nobody's using, which is kind of crazy. Joe Dell.
Hi,
My name's Giselle, and I'm actually not only a member of NWDA, I'm also on the parking SAC as the business member. One of the things that was the history there was the feedback from specifically the supply group that was also taken. So Jean was working with us on supply and also brought up the fact of how we were going to do the trees. And her response, and I quote, was, "PBOT will listen to me because they worked so closely with me." And I felt very concerned because you mentioned the need for transparency, but in that case, we had really an older member of our group that was being told by PBOT that they would listen to her. And I honestly don't think there was an ability to do that. Additionally, I was very disturbed by the fact that the city forester had not been reviewed about the trees. I mean, let's talk cart before the horse. I mean, there was a concern we were pushing back, and when the city forester finally came on board, I think he was quite appalled at the action being taken. So left hand and right hand was really out of swap there. And then if we talk about actions and things that are being paid for, the St. Clair crossing. We have actually approved that funding from the parking SAC, and I have not seen any action on that. Under duress, it's been approved, so there's been no actions and updates. So my concern is even though PBOT gets approval of things, we haven't seen the response.
Anybody else want to be recognized? Steve?
Cynthia, any response to Giselle that you'd like to make?
Yeah, one question, and thank you, Giselle, for your participation on the SAC and your comments. I've heard the trees come up a couple times. Can you share where that project was and how long ago?
So that was on specifically 21st and 23rd. It was talking about the extensions, crosswalk extensions that would therefore take out trees. They would also take out, as Tanya said, parking and the street seating for the cafes. What was a concern, it was quite a detailed plan that was brought up probably in second half of 23 or maybe second quarter of 23. It was reviewed and there was quite a lot of anxiety by PBOT because we were pushing back. And I believe that Jean actually felt that we were pushing back on her personal concerns. She was very upset, but she was upset because she had been told that she was going to be able to say yes or no on what specific trees. And I don't believe that was possible.
Oh,
Then, as probably Q3 last year, was when they actually brought the forester in, and that all kind of went bust, and I frankly haven't seen anything following that. But then again, we haven't had the SAC.
Okay.
And this whole, the tree thing too was integral to the intersection and enhancement project is the project that we're all talking about. And that came to a vote, I think it was our last meeting, I believe in September, about funding the project. And that's sort of when we learned that we're going to cut down a whole, dozens of trees. And the vote went, no, we're not going to spend the money, we're going to cut down these trees. And that's when sort of PBOT freaked out and said, like, well, we're going to do it anyway, and now we're going to cancel the SAC for a couple months. So that crush was right around all the same time. Steve.
I would just amplify what Richard said earlier and what has been relayed more recently. I think the intersection enhancement project is kind of most recent version of this desire that had been on part of the SAC to deal with the streetscape on the main streets in the Northwest District that had been ongoing for several years and had a variety of miscues and misadventures in terms of being able to actually put together a scope for what the SAC was asking for. It seemed as though it kept getting filtered in through a PBOT frame of reference rather than what would be a kind of more typical urban design frame of reference, which I believe is what the SAC was really requesting. But I would say broadly, my experience is that when the new board was seated a year or so ago, one of the characteristics of that new board was that it seemed much more willing to challenge the parking district staff and Piedmont more broadly about proposals that they were bringing forward. And I don't know if that was unfamiliar or from the staff's previous experience with the prior board, I doubt it. But they seemed disoriented, to my reckoning, by getting any sort of pushback whatsoever. And in my opinion, there were a variety of instances in which things needed to be questioned. The costs of things, the timing of things, sequence of things, all, in varying points at varying times, just seemed out of whack to, number of members of the SAC. And ultimately, I think that kind of culminated in, a position that the NWDA took with regard to the proposed budget for this current year for the parking district, which the NWDA proposed to support, but with a variety of conditions that were based on questions that had been raised in the prior 6 months. And it seems to me that that resolution from NWDA placing conditions on the approval of budget items, it just seems to me that's what precipitated the desire on the part of the staff to suspend the SAC. And all of that, I may be, that's my perception or my observation and assumption, and I may be completely off base on that, but it seems not too far-fetched, because leading up to that point, it just seemed like there was a series of instances in which parking district staff seemed to not know quite what to do when they were challenged about things that they were proposing. And that, to me, that's a tough way to run an advisory committee, unless you're really looking at the advisory committee as simply being an approving mechanism to check off the citizen input docs. And I don't think the membership of the current SAC ever saw themselves that way. So I think there's a fundamental piece here that really needs to be sorted out. And I will see whether it does or not. My question for you, though, is, given all of that and the kind of lack of communication or opacity of communication from the staff in the last 5 months, our understanding is that they are making or have made recommendations to Piedmont leadership about the nature of the relationship between the SAC and staff. I don't have any idea where that's going, and I don't think any of the other members of the SAC have any idea where that's going, and it's going to be revealed to us in next month's meeting. Do you have any sense as to where these recommendations may be going in the broadest sense, or what kind of big box they fit into? How Piedmont sees their relationship with the SAC needing to be updated?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for the question. And just to address your first point about the influence of that resolution on the decision to pause, I will say, at least from my point of view, it did not for us have an impact on that decision. So just wanted to state that. And then as far as your question about the Bureau's recommendations, so like I mentioned earlier, our office will be briefed soon on their recommendations and sort of their current thinking. But today we have not had that briefing yet. Like I said, I also had a family medical emergency. And so I also had to sort of adjust my schedule over the last couple of weeks. But we expect to have a briefing soon. But I do not currently have any updates for you there.
Okay, thank you. Were you involved then in the decision to suspend the SAC?
I was, like I said, that we did have a conversation with the Bureau. And like I said, for me, it was largely more from the administrative standpoint that it made sense to take a pause. And like I said, it was fairly fresh that we had just got the news about the budget constraints. And so we were being very cautious. But yeah, that's why I can share with you that the resolution did not have a bearing on my decision.
I'll take the next little point here. I think where some of that was a little confusing to us is that the salaries of one or both of the parking districts employees are paid through by parking money out of the Northwest District. So we didn't really understand where the lack of funds were if, you know, the meter money was going to pay their salaries. So that just really didn't ring true to us.
And I'll just clarify, and sorry to cut you off. I'll just clarify that we were talking about, so we saw this as an opportunity. So we're not just talking right now in the immediate term, but we are also, as a city, like I said, looking towards setting up the structure of government for the future council. So beyond even our time here in the city. So for me, it's also those larger conversations about advisory committees are happening. We're having conversations about even what does our service area look like? How do council office function? How does community engage? And so there's a lot of uncertainty just naturally happening right now. So as we're talking about the budget shortfall I was referencing was for our fiscal year 25 budget process, not right now. But at the same time, you know, the Bureau has experienced cuts over the last 5 years, and, you know, expectations for them, even coming from council, has not really decreased. So we're still, you know, still trying to do a lot of work, even though the Bureau has, you know, has lost staff over the years. So we did see this as an opportunity as we're talking about efficiencies and we're talking about, you know, how is this going to function, you know, as we look forward. So that's sort of what I was referencing. Rich?
Yeah,
Does that answer your question?
Well, I think like, it's not, if we're paying, if our meter district is paying for 2 salaries of Peabody employees, I don't think it's unreasonable that we could meet once a month to get some updates. So the pause didn't feel very strange. And then, you know, the thing too is that the SAC is, you know, a creation of city council. It's not a creation of Peabody. But Peabody is very integrally tied into it. So it's a very independent group and there's a lot of cross currents, you know, and I think the biggest issue that I saw is that there's been a disconnect between Peabody, the parking district, and the neighborhood. And I think that's where a lot of the tension is coming from, where a lot of what Peabody wanted to do was not necessarily what the neighborhood wanted. And when, you know, that came to a head, they said, well, you're not the neighborhood. You're just like, you know, you're a neighborhood association. You're the business district. You don't represent the neighborhood, which is true. We're advocates for the neighborhood, but also we have, you know, a bunch of seats on the board. By design. And so, you know, I felt the tension was just building there because we had the votes to say no to things and started using them because things sort of got disconnected. And, you know, at least I personally felt that Peabody had some sort of global goals or sort of carbon initiatives that weren't like fitting immediately into what the neighborhood needed. And we were losing out to some broader concerns. And as it is sort of money that is gathered here in the neighborhood and is supposed to be spent in the neighborhood, and we're supposed to have an advisory role in deciding how that money got spent, things felt like they got off track.
Thank you.
Do a final round of quick comments or quick questions, Rich.
Yes, the impression that many of us have of Peabody is that Peabody hates drivers. They don't want anyone to drive anywhere. They want everyone to take public transportation or walk or bicycle. And that they're doing everything in their power to make it more difficult to drive in the Northwest District rather than being concerned about what the people in the neighborhood actually need to do. There are a lot of elderly people that live in the Northwest District and they can't bicycle everywhere. They actually have to drive. They actually have to drive to places. And so, for example, what they've done on 24th Street now in the last week, they have made it impossible to turn left onto 24th Street from Thurman Avenue because of, from Vaughan Street, because with the claim that it's to improve the ability of pedestrians and bicyclists to get across Vaughan Road. But I don't see how the left-hand turn from Vaughan onto 24th affects that at all. They mentioned that that it's to reduce cut-through traffic. But the cut-through traffic that occurs on 24th is people who live in the neighborhood. They want to take that road because it is the simplest and easiest way for them to get from coming off of the expressway onto Vaughan to get into the neighborhood. Now I will have to go 3 blocks out of my way, burning more fuel, having more CO2 emissions, because they seem to think that funneling more and more traffic through fewer and fewer roads is improving safety. And it isn't, especially if they want to funnel more traffic down 23rd Street, 23rd Street has 10 times to 20 times the number of pedestrians that 24th Street has. And so by trying to funnel traffic through down 23rd and 25th, they're actually making it more dangerous for pedestrians. But they don't see it that way. And no amount of discussing things with PBOT seems to be able to reconcile the issue that they're not doing. If they took a poll of the people who live on 24th and all the streets from Vaughan to, say, Gleason, I have no doubt that the poll would overwhelmingly say, just leave 24th the way it is. But PBOT didn't bother to do that. And that's distressing to me.
We'll move quickly here, running out of time. Joselle.
Just following up on what Richard was mentioning, one of the things that I've been frustrated as a SAC member is the lack of data. You know, what is the results? Can we see the results of what have been the changes and the current extensions and the current activities? When we were doing Northwest in Motion, I'm actually near several of the large planters that were put out, and we asked what was the plan for the planters. They said, I'm sure that the neighbors will come do things with them. Again, nothing has ever been followed up, and they've been a nice distraction with graffiti on them. So that fact of putting things in and not following up and not having a way to measure success or failure or just feedback has been very frustrating.
I think that's the thing too, a lack of responsiveness to the neighborhood, and more top-down activity, I would say. Any last comment from the room or online? And then again, we're gonna have a SAC meeting on Wednesday. We'll be here at Friendly House, and the Zoom link is online. If you need that, send me an email. And then Cynthia, any last comments? Thank you so much for coming, by the way. I know it's you're sort of getting an earful, but you know, there's a lot of frustrations, I guess.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, again, Steve reaching out and inviting, and Jeremy, sorry for the lack of response before then. And just, that's what we're here for. We're here to serve the community. And so I'm happy to drop in and hear your questions and concerns. Certainly, I took notes throughout our conversation, and I will definitely follow up with the Bureau and as well as Commissioner Mapp. So just want to say thank you. And it's a sunny day out there, and you all are here doing your civic duty. So just want to appreciate you all too taking the time.
What's the best way for us to follow up on this?
Oh, well, you've got my email address. So if you want to just email me, you're welcome to do that.
Cool. And feel free to stop by Wednesday, it'll be a pretty rowdy meeting, I would expect. So we're trying to figure out how we should view ourselves, I think, in a way. So we'll start working that out.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Take care.
All right, next on the agenda, we're talking elections. Steve.
The elections are coming up, and what always signals the start of election season is the appointment of an election committee. And this year, once again, Bob Whitestein and Roger Relakis have been tasked or nominated or kind of nudged into serving on that capacity. I would like to make a motion to approve their they're forming the election committee, which is by and large responsible for what could be considered certifying the election. I would only hold it open if there are any others who would like to serve on the committee that are not involved in the election this year.
Can I ask you a question about the election?
Sure.
This is the same Bob Weinstein who's running for city council.
That's correct.
Well, I like a lot. Should the person who's running for an office be certifying the election?
I don't think there is, but it.
You can't run for our board and be on our election.
Oh, it's for the board, not the
Yeah,
election.
right, I thought she was asking.
That's what I was asking the same question. I'm like, this is
So
for
I
us,
decided I,
right?
so I wanted
He
to,
asked about.
that's why Steve, that's why I spoke up.
Thank you for the point of
No,
clarification.
right, no, it seemed like many people don't have that question. I
There's a
love being
lot
on
of
elections
elections this
committee.
Anybody else want to volunteer to be part of the election committee that is not on the board or will be running for the board? All right,
I don't think so. I'm just putting down my calendar.
All right, please.
motion to approve the election committee is our
Wait a
second.
Need a second.
I'll second it.
Joselle, got seconds.
Joselle. All right,
Any objection to the election committee?
Thank you.
Having no objection, the motion passes. Anything else we need to talk about the election? When do candidates need to declare themselves and all that jazz?
it's all coming up.
Okay, we'll get a notice, I guess. Okay. Any questions about the election from anybody? All right, let's move into our communications and Michael.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay, just quickly, 5 points. Northwest is working with its counterpart, Southeast Uplift, to hold several candidate forums over the next several months. And I'm one of the people working on behalf of Northwest on that project. Specifically, next week, March 27th, there'll be a webinar with the two candidates for district attorney, Nathan Vasquez and Mike Schmidt. And it will be strictly a webinar. There won't be an audience present. And Steve, have you agreed to serve as one of the two moderators?
I did, yep. I had a meeting today with,
All right.
Darlene.
Thank you very much for doing that. Do you want to say anything about what you're doing, Steve?
Nope, want to keep it a secret.
When will that be again?
It's gonna be, March.
March 27th.
From 5 to 7, I think it is, yeah.
This is DA.
Yeah, the two candidates for district attorney.
Okay, now, next item, on April 25th, there will be a candidate forum for the three candidates for the District 1 spot for
Michael,
Multnomah County Commission.
Michael, let me just add one thing.
Sure.
I know that because time is short, we did discuss at the meeting today in preparation for this webinar that the neighbor associations were going to be asked to submit any questions or topics that they would like submitted to the two candidates. So since we're here, folks start thinking about if you have questions or topics you'd like to have addressed to the two candidates and send them either to me or to Darlene at Neighbors West Northwest. Thanks.
Okay, April 25th, there'll be a candidate forum for the three candidates for county commissioner. That's District 1 that covers Northwest. This event will be held at Lincoln High School. It's a tentative time beginning at about 5:30. There will be an audience present. So in the Lincoln High School auditorium holds a pretty good number of people. So I think we'll be doing that. Todd, did you agree to be one of the moderators for that?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to get folks involved in it so that certainly Northwest Association has got some game in. And that again will be a hybrid delivery, so it'll be an audience, but you can also watch it on a video. And then the next month, Friday, May 17th, Northwest and the Southeast Uplift will jointly sponsor a mayoral candidate mixer. The idea is that it's not really a formal forum, but it's an opportunity to come and meet the candidates. The event will be held at the Laurelhurst Club across the river from 4 to 7 p.m. And the audience attendees will be limited to about 250 people because that's all the Laurelhurst Club will handle. So there's going to be an early registration, and I suggest you not pass it up if you have the opportunity to get in there and actually meet these candidates. Each of the 6 candidates, and by the way, there are 6 candidates now for the mayor's position, will have about 10 minutes to introduce themselves and really not take questions, but talk a little bit about their vision for what they see for the future of Portland. And then final note tonight, there are currently 15 candidates for the city council position for District 4, that's us. And since the opportunity to apply for being a council candidate doesn't close until August 27th, it's very possible we'll see even more than 15 candidates to represent us in the 3 slots that will be available. So what we've done is to say that most likely a week or so after the closure of registration on August 27th, we will hold 3 forums, each of which will have 5 council members, council candidates in the forum, so that you have a chance to see all of them, but each of them has a chance to get their message out rather than trying to squeeze in 15 or more candidates into an hour and a half or so. And again, that in addition will be a webinar so that you can see it. There hasn't been a location determined for that, but it will be in early September. So that's what's going on so far with the elections upcoming.
Questions for Michael? Steve?
2 questions. The date of the mayoral mixer,
May 17th. It's a Friday afternoon.
and secondly, are the NWDA's position towards requests from candidates to meet with the board and or interface with the district? How are you handling those?
We've talked about this, Steve, and I actually wrote to one candidate who wanted to speak before the board. I said that they are welcome to come. We have a public comment period at the end of the meeting. And in fact, as you know, at the February board meeting, we had 2 council candidates who made comments and introduced themselves during the public comment period. If we were to actually put something on the agenda for a specific candidate, that would be seen as not acceptable in terms of favoritism for one candidate versus the other 14 that aren't on the agenda. So that's how we're handling it.
Thank you.
I think we've got some good events coming up here too. The DA forum, I'll be hosting the Monona County Commissioner debate, I guess, or I don't know what they're calling it, get together. So I think, you know, we'll continue to look to ways to integrate ourselves into the race without impacting the board meeting itself. So if anybody has any other ideas to engage the election, then let us know, and we'll try to do some other things too. Rich is on mute.
Yeah. I managed to speak with 3 of the candidates for the District 4 position at the fundraiser they had at NWNW last week, and all of them would be happy to come to a board meeting and spend like 10 or 15 minutes sort of discussing their positions. But they, I think they asked me about whether we could endorse candidates. And of course I told them, no, we can't endorse candidates, but we can endorse policies. We can endorse policies, and we can say that these candidates who are running support the policies that we endorse. And I think that is a perfectly reasonable thing for a neighborhood organization to be able to do. And I think we do want to invite as many candidates as possible to come after our board meetings to discuss their positions, because I think as long as it's open to all of them, then there can't be any issue of favoritism.
I would say let's talk about it, but this is not until September. We've got time to work through it. But again, the position that NWNW is taking is that we do not invite candidates and put them on the agenda. They can show up through public comment and make as many comments as they want, and we will all be listening.
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable, that they not be on the agenda, but they're invited because after all, these are public meetings. Any member of the public can come and discuss things that they'd be interested in discussing, so.
I don't think they should be invited. I honestly, I don't think they should be actively invited. I think that would be a demonstration of how aware they are and serious they are about neighborhood associations to take the initiative and on their own initiative come here rather than being solicited.
I would just suggest that we might want to think about putting together a short list, 1, 2, 3 questions for candidates that do contact us that we could relay to them for their written reply to same questions to each candidate.
That might be something we could work on, is sending a questionnaire to the candidates and see what comes back, and distributing that to membership, I guess, in a way. Anybody else? All right, good stuff.
Let's work on that once we get past these others. After May, we'll start to focus on the council candidates.
Yeah, there's still a lot of time. Let's move on to Juliet and the government transition.
So for those of you who don't know me or just met me, in addition to being on this board, I also serve on the Government Transition Advisory Committee, advising City Council on the charter reform transition. It's a 2-year appointment and we're 1 year in. So things are really getting busy now. You may have seen the article in Willamette Week today about the letter we sent to council about in-district offices that actually came out of a subcommittee that I'm co-chairing. And I'm the one who chose the word premature to describe the resolution they passed to have district offices in place, permanent district offices up to city standards. And I mean standards of internet connectivity and security, whatever that means, by January 1. But, you know, that's all they did. We don't know exactly, you know, what that means. Certainly, we don't know what the new counselors will want. And I know the article today said that it will just cost more to first do temporary offices and then permanent. That there's no basis for that because we don't know what the requirements are going to be. So now we're working on a couple more sets of recommendations, one for community engagement. That letter just went out to the broader committee today, and then another will be forthcoming on council operations. So that's onboarding, standing committees, how they take public input, and a number of other things. And the committee will be issuing some formal recommendations in June. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. I think that's going out for public comment, but I need to find out more about that. Because you keep, every time I go to a meeting or watch another one, I learn more stuff. So we've been doing a lot of outreach events. There was one here last Sunday, no, 2 Sundays ago. That was well attended, great questions. And then we're holding some listening sessions. There was 2 of them were virtual. One was a couple days ago, it was virtual. Tomorrow night, there's one for East Portland that's in person. And then the third one is on next week, I think. Listening sessions. And so ranked choice voting is really coming up as a prominent topic now as we get closer to it. I brought some literature tonight on that and just an annual report on the transition. If you're interested in any of that, there's going to be a lot more information forthcoming about ranked choice voting after the May election. So we're actually kind of deferring some of our presentations. So after that, because there's so many questions about ranked choice voting and we're all still learning and it's still being worked on. I talked about the listening sessions. Oh, so in the last couple weeks, we found out that the city is the transition team is working with 4 disciplines, or 4, they called them pillars or something. Community engagement, communications, equity, and sustainability. And I have no idea how those puzzle pieces fit in with all these other things, and I'm not sure that our committee does yet. So, stay tuned and, we'll continue to figure those things out. So, yeah, that's all the news for now.
We should invite you back next month again.
Yeah, it's gonna be more and more, as we are rolling downhill to the election.
Questions for Juliet, Rich?
Yes. Juliet, I noticed that I got an email that the city is going to be funding grants. Going to be funding grants for outreach to marginalized communities to teach them about ranked choice voting. But there is nothing on the website for the city to everyone else who will actually read their website of what the hell, how ranked choice voting works and what the appropriate thing is, how it's actually going to work. So I'm wondering why the city is spending thousands, and it looked like it was going to be probably on the order of $50,000 to $100,000 on grants to reach marginalized populations when it isn't trying to reach the majority of the population in terms of how it's going to function with ranked choice voting. Can't they put something up that says, this is how ranked choice voting works? These are the, I mean, why doesn't the city put that up on a website?
Well, I don't know that they haven't. I'll look on the transition page and see if there's anything, because they have publications like this that are about ranked choice voting. So this content has got to be online somewhere. But what I know about that is that the charter, the new charter, does mandate voter education to traditionally underrepresented groups. So I think that's philosophically what is supposed to be happening. The question of why they're spending so much money on it is a completely different thing. And I will try to find you the content online. If it's not there, that is a serious oversight. So I'll look into it. Thank you. Michael?
I am bothered by this idea that only districts 1 and 2 are going to get any education about ranked choice voting. I understand they're perhaps more diverse in the ethnicity, but nevertheless, people on the districts 3 and 4 also need an education about ranked choice voting. And to simply discriminate against districts 3 and 4 because the districts tend to vote a little bit more than districts 1 and 2 doesn't seem to be an equitable decision by the city.
Does seem lopsided. I will say that, any group in any district can request a presentation, as many as they want, and they can ask whatever questions they want. So they are empowered to get the information that way, but maybe they have to take a little more initiative. I don't really know how those grants are working and, exactly where that money is going, but I understand what you're saying.
I'll just make a quick comment about, I had a conversation with one of the city council, Ken, I think, and about ranked choice voting and how he was concerned about it. And I said, okay, well, what are you concerned about? I think, it sounds like it's a decent idea. And he said, well, the devil's in the details is that, you need a computer program to go through the ballots and declare a winner because, the votes cascade depending on what happens. And, is there going to be transparency? Are they going to make the ballots open to everybody so people can independently verify that the process was done correctly? Because if not, we're just relying on some algorithm out there somewhere, and nobody's really sure if it's legitimate or not. And I think we're suffering from an age of are things legitimate or not? And I thought that I was pretty impressed with his take on it, because then I started becoming concerned about how that's going to function too. So a little outside the scope maybe of government transition, but something that
seems like an inevitable question. And I think that, however, I don't think we're reinventing the wheel. This is done elsewhere, and luckily it's a county thing. So
Where's it been done?
In
this specific kind of arrangement?
it hasn't been done in this specific kind of arrangement.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is done in a number of other cities, and I can find out for you which they are. But it's hard to find any city that's doing quite what we're doing. So for example, there are a lot of cities that have districts. Most don't have district offices. They mostly, I think I've said this, do pop-up events and virtual or town halls and stuff. The ones that do only have one that I've spoken to only have one counselor per district, which is far more simple. And when I actually talked to a couple cities and told them we had 3 apiece, they kind of gasped. And, you know, this is just anecdotal. It's not, I don't have any kind of across the board data about this. I've just been doing some interviews. And I guess during charter reform, they kept saying to city staff, just find us, you know, an example of how it's done somewhere else. And there just wasn't one that could be overlaid over Portland. So that's part of why this is so hard to figure out. And you also don't see most cities have strong mayors, most cities don't have 3 per district. I don't know where that number came from, so there's nothing quite like it out there.
Any last questions?
Portland. How to stay weird.
It's gonna be pretty wild.
Stay tuned.
Onto the planning committee, I'm gonna tee this up real quick. And I was in a meeting, and I think Steve was too, a couple days ago. And there was a bunch of concerned property owners and businesses over by 17th and Thurman, where a proposed crisis center may be going in. What's the building called? It's like a guy's Premier Gear building. I think, at least for me, I was becoming increasingly comfortable with the proposal to have the crisis center in there, as we got to talk to the operators, and seemed like we're gonna have like 16 beds, and we're sort of well thought out about how to get people in and out of there. And then sort of we had the other shoe drop, I would say, in the meeting, that there's gonna be a lot more going on in this building than just the crisis center. That also there is a proposed housing arrangement where some of the people that graduate from the crisis center could live there. And they're talking about maybe 100 or 120 people that could be living full-time in this building, with no restrictions really of when they can come and go. It would just be like a traditional lease, I suppose. And then there could also be some other businesses that could be invited into the building, including a possibility of a sobering center and some other things. So this kind of like seems like it graduated into more of a cooperative situation, where you're gonna have a mishmash of different human services businesses all in one building, all, you know, in sort of a very sensitive part of town where there's a lot of chaos under those viaducts. And of course, you have the Montessori school right next door, and they're not happy with what's being presented, I guess. So I thought that the new idea that it's not just going to be a crisis center, but many more things, was very concerning to me. And I'll leave it there and just introduce the planning committee, who's taken a very active role in taking over this letter.
No, thank you, Todd. I think you covered it. I will clarify a couple of things. One, the sobering center is not, that's directly from the owner of the.
Got it.
And that somehow was out flapping around. KGW, of course, are pretty graphs.
There was a media report that floated that idea.
But yes, there are 80 units of supportive housing. And that aspect of the program is far less defined. Meeting last week was with the provider and the operator of the crisis center isn't really the right name, I don't think. It's in any respect, it's a mental health treatment facility. So the operator of that facility came and met with us for an hour and a half and agreed to lay out some agent their program. And, you know, in many respects, it sounds like the right one, because they sound pretty no nonsense about the conditions that have to exist for a facility like that to be successful. Not the least of which is that no camping zone for up to 1,000 feet in any given direction around there, which would be quite a swoop, but also quite a stretch in terms of being able to imagine the city being able to achieve that, or even the city supporting that. Right? So, we'll see. But I think, as Todd referenced, in fact, the shoe that dropped was, oh, you don't have, there isn't an operator at this point in time for the support housing. And essentially that, I think the sense of the committee that I got, in communication that came out today was, well, if we just pause here until provider is identified, because we're just speaking in abstractions until then. So that's where it sits right now. I want to make sure that we get some time to our guest Pete here, but are there any questions or comments about where the center stands now?
I don't have a question on the center, but I just wondered if there's a status update on Montgomery Park.
I don't know.
I put a link to the ranked choice voting info in the chat.
Great.
I think it's identical to what's right there.
Any more planning questions? I would say,
I think Montgomery Park and the situation in general, I think the youth life for a while, yeah. That always kind of signals when they're gonna see it.
and the planning committee agenda this week includes talk about premier gear building.
That's correct.
All that goes on
That's
there.
correct.
So Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Always great meetings, if you get a chance to attend. And that'll be a heavy topic of concern discussion. Anybody last check-ins for planning committee? All right,
Just out of curiosity, I sent the minutes or the meeting notes from the meeting last week out to the planning committee. Would you like, should I send them to the board as well? Would anybody be interested?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, before public comment, any new business or anything else that needs to be addressed? All right, we'll move to public comments. Any public commenters?
Yes, my name is Pete Graviel. I'm running to be the House of Representatives, District 33. I'm a parent in the community. I've been to a few of these meetings before. The last one was to find out what was going on underneath Thurman off ramp there. And I learned that there was supposed to be a dog park, but I haven't fortunately seen a dog park yet. I was actually showing up to pitch an idea of a skate park, but then when I got to the meeting, I realized how far people had gone with the dog park. I just thought it's tight. I also run the Hillside Soccer Club, coach my daughter's team at play over at Chapman. I spent 9 years at the United Nations, climate change advisor to developing countries. I accomplished quite a bit there. And before coming here and being a downtown trial lawyer 8 years ago, I raised my daughter here. And I came here to find out what specifically about this area you'd like your state representative to be thinking about. I know that under the freeway, it's ODOT land, I believe, or at least the state has a significant role, could play a bigger role in solving that problem. And again, that's just something I know as a member of this community and being frustrated. That's my bike route to take my daughter to school. And I know from talking to folks since began running and reading the Northwest Examiner, that forced fire mitigation and how we're gonna handle that is an issue that's very specific to this district. Obviously, any state rep has a lot of issues they gotta contend with, but the purpose of coming here is to find out what else should I be thinking about as this, if I want to be the state rep from the Northwest. Yes.
Glad you could come. One of the things this week brought up to city council, when I was speaking to them in December. It's great to have the additional housing and the density is wonderful. But without some open spaces or some sports facilities, some central meeting areas, you're just packing a lot of people with no outlet. And from the city council standpoint, they say, well, look, you've got Forest Park right there. And Steve and I say, try running your kid up in the stroller on Forest Park. But so I think it's a good thing that we're pushing for more housing, great. But more housing also means it needs to be a community, just not a check mark on the number of units you have there.
Yeah, and does that, does the state have any involvement in those planning decisions, or is that really like, because I understand you guys interact with the city and the county all the time, as you should, because they have more and more to say about your daily lives, but does the state have a role, say, for example, in the industrial area? It seems to be a creep into that.
Well, so I think where I bring it up is the signature that Kotek just did on the expanding the housing. So how do we, at least at the upper level, put some comment in there of, it's not just housing, how do you create the community And how do you, if we're looking at 40,000 more people coming into the industrial center, and guess what? We have no parks, we have no school, we have no swimming pool. And the response that the traditional Montgomery Park developers said, well, the individual owners will have shared space for everybody. Well, tell me, shared space in a developer, there's no backbone in there. So how do we? Yeah. So that's just a secondary thought on.
Canada states, it's probably so much affordable housing, but
Exactly.
strings attached to that, so that whoever wants to get it has to make sure that you build a community.
Exactly.
That makes sense to me. Yes.
We've talked a lot about earthquake possibilities and planning for, and we still have all of the oil trains ending up going through Northwest and all the storage. And that seems terribly dangerous considering what the nature of that land is that all this stuff is sitting on. And it seems like people talk about it, but nothing ever really gets proposed or changed. I mean, it makes no sense to me that all of it is on this side of the river anyway, because if the bridges go down, it's a problem for everybody. So anyway.
That's a good point. I've been knocking on doors. So the only part of the District 33 that's on the other side of the river is St. John's, the area below Lombard. And so I started over there. That's sort of seems to be purged away. And I learned about two things. I learned about those tanks and that
The
road.
liquid natural gas tank.
Yeah, and I learned about the lynn frogs that are migrating across
yeah,
the
the
30.
frogs,
I
yeah.
want to find a way to get them to the wetland. So that's on my radar, but thank you.
You put them in buckets.
Long taxi, right?
Yeah.
You make tunnels. You make tunnels
And
for
it's
them.
actually an ODA. It's ODA road.
Yeah.
Somebody else had hand? Do that.
So I did my master's project on the need to plan schools for Portland Housing Bureau or whatever, to work with the school district to plan schooling for the Broadway corridor. This is before COVID. All schools in the Broadway, in the Lakewood cluster were full and they were going to construct all this housing. That's going to come back around. But my concerns are always environmental, so climate change, number one concern in my life. We're finally going to get rid of leaf blowers, but it's still 2 years away and the city has been so slow and silly about that whole thing. What's that? Gas leaf blowers. The other thing is our garbage and recycling system doesn't work, and I know that's Metro, but what do we do about it? There's gotta be some kind of collaboration, and what's a huge source of global warming? Methane. Do people compost correctly? No. Do they use it? Do they do it right? I just think there's a huge educational curve that needs to happen, and in school, so the kids are growing up with it too. And then why don't we have a no idling law? I'm so tired of coming out of my, no idling. So tired of coming out of my house and cars and diesel trucks are just running. And we still have diesel trucks in use that wouldn't be allowed in California. They're so dirty and toxic. And then there's also noise pollution. Last night, I live right by the Good Sam, and there was so much noise coming out of that place at about 10 o'clock last night. And I've complained to them many times, and they tell me, the city told me that I need to keep my own log, and for a while I was running out there to record it. Of course, I did that last night. As soon as I get out there with my phone, it stops. But it's just a ridiculous amount of noise, and, they supposedly have a good neighbor agreement with the neighborhood, but they're a terrible neighbor. And so there should at least be some kind of noise, when they, at one point, when they redid their emergency room, they just staged all the equipment right across the street from me and not even on their property. They ran their projects all night long and not even like a card in the mail saying this is coming. So noise pollution, air pollution, it makes me crazy.
Climate change is something that the state can, should, and is, but we can do better at, but it's fighting. And that's sort of my bread and butter. So I spent 9 years working on that issue at the United Nations. I got an amendment passed called the Valley Amendment, which took one of the 6 families of greenhouse gases and basically eliminated from the earth. That was a 9-year project. In the interim, I advised the European Commission, I advised the US government, the Obama administration. So I fully intend to get into Salem, get with the best and brightest climate nonprofit environmental organizations in the state, say, where are we at? You know, a couple of years ago, the Republicans walked out on a climate bill. That tells me it's probably a pretty good bill. So should we go back and look at that while still thinking about the things that have been done since and what we captured? So that's what I want to do.
And we just lost our crack at congestion pricing, at least for a while. So
Congestion pricing.
because of the COTEC, putting the tools on hold for the, I-5 bridge, and also it goes out to Clackamas County, and I understand that whole issue, but there's gotta be a better way. I mean, they don't have to put them all going east, but I think that, and then what I heard on the radio was, concerns about low income. Well, ODOT has provisions for low income. Yeah, so.
Well, I'm also concerned about people coming from Vancouver who have basically escaped court and they're on taxes, then coming in 2 or 3 days of work, a week to work, and a lot of lawyers.
Building a bridge.
As long as they stay below 4 days a week, they can, or 5 with all your vacations, you can not pay working taxes for most of the time. So they ought to be paying a toll in that direction, small direction.
Well, we need a sales tax or something. I mean, we can't just not have a taxes.
Steve,
Who are you running against?
There is a doctor who's running, and there is a woman who runs a BIPOC focused substance abuse clinic on the east side. So
Who's the current mayor?
vaccine Dexter.
So she's
running for Congress.
she's running for Congress.
I would just notice, it's already been noted, that the state through ODOT is a great big neighbor of ours. And they seem to be unable to manage their power. So that's kind of a big deal for us that, it keeps, just kind of getting shuffled off because there's nothing you can do about it. The dog park, in my reckoning, never got.
Dog run. Keep using the word dog run. so the lawyers-
Right. It was like a cartoon interaction with the state.
Section 4F says we cannot disrupt parks.
Exactly,
Federal law.
It seemed like a great idea.
It's in all sorts of
Talking with
states.
this group out of Milwaukee that had done exactly the same
What does
thing.
that mean?
We got to ODOT and, their idea was to harden the entire area under the viaduct, which means rip wrap.
So maybe next time your state representative gets the twisted arm or two, then we can get this.
Anyway.
I couldn't agree more with the graffiti on ODOT's property. I think that as you're driving into the city, say from the airport, immediately you're taken aback by that.
Yeah.
The city needs to work with the state and come up with a plan to not just paint over the stuff, but look, you just can't damage property over and over and over again and cost taxpayers money to paint over and over again. So we need to catch the folks who are doing this. I understand it's a big interstate thing that I'm driving up and down the 5, going from Seattle to LA and San Diego and San Fran. And there's kind of like graffiti gangs. There's also local groups that do it. But it just does not look good. And the state can't just have property in the middle of our city and then light it by neglecting it. So that's something I wholeheartedly do.
Graffiti is one thing, but the ground area underneath the
Yeah,
viaduct
former
here
tents are,
It's
and-
completely locked up. And, or it's completely degraded.
Is that what they're gonna do over there? They're just gonna build a fence? Hope that keeps everybody out?
And now they're just over on Wilson.
Yeah, they moved.
I mean, the people that they moved just are a block further over and bothering the businesses that are there.
They're trying to develop the area.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a final question or?
Well, I like the idea on the graffiti. I know that's a larger visual. But these signs, how did they state ODOT not replace the signs that are half covered?
That's like a new thing, like this year. They started, because it used to be a code, you couldn't do the signs because that's dangerous. And then the police might get mad and actually go after it. But they seem to have gone to the signs.
Yeah, because especially 405, if you were a visitor, you'd have no open heck finding where you were supposed to be going.
Or tourists.
All right, well, we can continue after the meeting, I suppose. If there's any additional questions, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Appreciate it. Any final thoughts, questions, concerns, motions? Take care of them. All right, I'll move to adjourn the meeting. Second, Josdell, objections, none heard. We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.